Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Not Defined by Endo with me, Teniola. I have been on a mission to find and amplify the voices of amazing people who have founded health-focused businesses, services, or not-for-profit organizations. These people are working really hard to make a positive difference in the lives of people battling different kinds of health issues, or those just wanting to make better decisions regarding their health. Why am I doing this? Well, I'll tell you why. Living with illness is so difficult. Most times, it consumes and overwhelms us. It takes over our lives until we feel like there is nothing left to enjoy. So I decided that this season of the podcast would focus on people doing something good for health. Many of these founders discovered strength from their own personal lives and stories and are making such a great impact. I wanted to speak to them, understand their motivations, and get excited by what they have to offer. So join me on this journey and let's meet these inspirational people together. Welcome, Anna, to Not Defined by Endo podcast today. I'm so happy to have you on the show, and I'm excited to, go through your journey, your experiences, and what you are offering women all over the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be part of your podcast.
Yeah, me too. So let's begin. I want to start by asking you a question about yourself, which is usually what I do. I feel like I need to switch it around and ask about yourself at the end or something. So I know from the little I know you are also an endometriosis warrior and advocate. So can you share a bit about your story from, your symptoms and, what your journey has been like having endometriosis?
Yes, of course. So I started this journey is a great word, but it's not a good one when you think about endometriosis. But I remember I was around in my mid-20s when I started having really bad period cramps. And at the time, I was living in London. And I went to, of course, the gynecologist, and they found fibroids. So I started having fibroids, and they didn't see any endometriosis at the time. So it started just basically getting worse and worse. The pain was increasing. The number of days where I had pain was increasing. And I used to go back to Spain often, since it's easy now. I'm in New York, but when I was in London, it was really easy. And I think I often say I'm one of those lucky ones that got diagnosed relatively quickly.
Okay.
My doctor, I always kept my OBGYN in Spain, who's a family friend, and he spent about an hour with me explaining everything when he found that I had endometriosis. And that is so rare, right?
Very rare. You're definitely
So rare. So I will never forget sitting there, and he explained, and he drew everything. And this is your uterus, and these are your ovaries, and this is what's happening. And I had never heard of endometriosis in my life, right? So that was, I guess, the seed that got planted in me in terms of how important the role of a doctor is to, first of all, to feel seen and heard. And second of all, is to tell you, right? To tell you what's going on.
Yep.
So I was very lucky that A, he found it straight away with an ultrasound, and B, that he took the time to explain everything to me. So I started then going through surgeries. And I said surgeries because I've been through 5 of them.
Wow.
So over the period of a decade, I ended up having those 5 surgeries, normally laparoscopy. And the last surgery I had it about 2.5 years ago. And in previous years, I got diagnosed that it was stage 4 endometriosis.
Okay. Wow.
And my colon had been infiltrated, as it happens a lot with endometriosis. Yeah. So they kind of told me, we can watch this, we can see how it goes. At the moment, there is no need to operate. But then my life became a nightmare. So I was a partner at a company in London. I was heading global sales and marketing. I had a big team underneath me. And I was trying to do my job, just do my job. And I would sit there in meetings with 3 male partners, 3 guys. They're looking at me like, oh, here she comes, period time, right? Kind of not wanting to, feeling awkward and looking at me in a weird way. And I was just bending down with pain, bending down. So I basically, one day I sent them a link. There was a front page feature on The Guardian, did a massive feature about endometriosis. And finally I got it. I basically was like, okay, this is my chance to tell them what I'm going through. And so I did. And I never got an answer back.
Really?
Right. So, and that was again another point of kind of influence in my life, something that, kind of my memory stops there. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is big, because they have wives, they have daughters, they have sisters and cousins, but they don't want to know. And I think really it's not their fault. I think it's just society through generations have taught us to stay quiet.
Yep.
Then it came to the point where I moved to the US. I had been through 4 surgeries at that point in time. I was married at the time. I was told I couldn't have children anymore. And then in my last, it's still very hard for me to talk about it. In my last surgery, they basically had to break the news that they had to perform a full hysterectomy and a colon resection. So they had to cut my colon and put it back together and get rid of that little piece that was infiltrated with endometriosis. So you were mentioning before, it's not just endometriosis. It's the ramifications. Yes. It's the trauma, it's the pain, it's the infertility possibility, it's the menopause or surgical menopause, as it was my case. There are so many different aspects to endo. And I just realized, okay, I need to do something about this. I can't stand it anymore. I suffer when I hear stories. And I called the Endometriosis Foundation of America, and I told them I wanted to volunteer my time. I wanted to help. So I'm now chair of their advisory board, and I'm helping on a voluntary basis. And then I decided with my own savings to start Hormone University. So that was last year, and we are creating a wonderful community. I've got good business acumen from so many years leading teams and sales and marketing in different companies. So I thought, well, I'm going to take my knowledge and my personal experience to create the first platform that can really educate and help women understand what happens when you go through hormonal imbalances. So that was the start of Hormone University.
Wow. I feel like there's so much to unpack there. So I'm going to take you back, and thank you first of all for sharing your painful story. I know the feeling, like sometimes you just feel like you're drowning in your life and your experiences. And I think one of the hardest things for me has been that there's no cure. So it's like you're told that you have this disease, and it's not that they're telling you that, okay, there's a treatment plan, this is how we're going to deal with it. It's really confusing. Like, everyone is different. You need a multidisciplinary team to even take care of you and understand what the right treatments are. And there's still so much unawareness, even in the medical system, about
Oh,
the
for
right
sure.
way to go about it. So first of all, I applaud you for, being sharing your story and, encouraging people out there that they're not alone, and also for what you started with Hormone University. But I wanted to ask a few things. The first thing is, so you mentioned that you were one of the lucky ones who got diagnosed early enough, and you had to have surgery 5 times. So would you say that these surgeries were excision surgeries, ablation surgeries, or what was the reason for the continuous surgeries? Now, I'm asking this because a lot of people in the endometriosis community have undergone loads of surgeries as well. But for those that haven't gone through these surgeries, they think surgery is the answer. They think I just need to get that one surgery. If I just can get the excision surgery, then I'll be fine.
Mm,
But a lot of people, especially like you and others who have experienced multiple surgeries, I want to share and I want people to be aware that a lot of times you have to do it over and over again. So why would you say that happened in your case?
correct, exactly. And because there is no known cure, this is an issue, right? So in my personal case, where I had laparoscopy, excision surgery,
Okay.
it would get fine after a while. And as we know, or maybe some people don't know, when your period comes back, endometriosis can come back.
Yeah.
So what we usually see, and also talking with our communities, is that we tend to be women that cannot detoxify estrogen very well, right?
Yeah.
We're highly estrogenic. And so the first thing I would say, if you want to avoid surgery, look at what you're eating on a daily basis, right? I didn't know that at the time. And there are anti-inflammatory foods are really important. But going back to your question, in my case, I think, unlucky because I cannot understand how it just came back again and again and again. So I actually don't have a specific answer. I would have loved to have avoided surgery so many times. I always say that's kind of like the last resort, right? It shouldn't be the rule. It should be the exception.
Mm.
So, and I know that in my particular case, they kind of burned a lot of my follicles in my ovaries, which then led to, of course, very, very low probability of getting pregnant.
Mm.
So that's why my message really is, first of all, see what options do you have from a natural point of view, if you can, right? If the pain is relatively manageable. And then kind of go up in the ladder, right? Okay, if this is not working, what else can I do? And if it's, of course, unmanageable, then, unfortunately, that's just the case, right? They have to clean it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and I feel like many people also have ablation surgery, which is well said that it's not as good as excision, just because it burns the surface of the endometriosis. And like you said, endometriosis is, an estrogenic condition. It can build its own blood vessels and things like that. So yes, it's a really difficult disease, and I think surgery can definitely make people's lives better, especially in the short, like for a while. But many people end up saying, I had to have another surgery. Oh my God, the endometriosis has come back. Or maybe it's because they didn't take out everything. Because if you think about it, I've watched quite a few endometriosis surgeries, or I've seen quite a few surgeries. I think I'm one of those weird ones that go on YouTube and say, what exactly does it mean?
Right.
And you can see that in there is just a whole mess. And I wouldn't be surprised if sometimes they actually take out what they can see, and then there are some spots left, which no one is perfect. It's not a perfect science. I used to think surgery was, perfect, they know exactly, but it's really not a perfect science, even though, you know, they should use the right approaches, the right methods, like actual excision surgery. But like you were saying, it's just difficult for it to be that it's one surgery and that's the end. A lot of times people do this over and over again. So I just wanted to highlight that, just so that people are aware of how
Yeah,
it can happen repeatedly.
good point. Great point. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm so sorry once again about, you know, having to have a hysterectomy because of the pain. But I wanted to ask, after you had a hysterectomy, did your symptoms then, you know, really get better? Because once again, one of the myths out there is that hysterectomy is the, you know, will take care of your endometriosis forever. But I understand why they say that, because, you know, sometimes it means that you're no more having periods. But then others say, like, I have a friend who had a full hysterectomy, but she had endometriosis on her, I think it was her lungs. So
Oh,
she was still having cyclical pain. And it, when she tried to really understand it, she realized that it seemed like endometriosis was back, but on her lungs, even without having the female parts and all that. So I wanted to ask your experience after your hysterectomy,
yeah.
and you know, how did you feel after that?
Yes. So I had a full hysterectomy, which basically means they take everything out, including the uterus, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. You don't have to go that route. I had a whole mess. And I also want to mention something there. A doctor recommended me here in the US that I get the Mirena.
Okay. The Mirena coil.
The Mirena coil. And the worst pain I ever encountered was right after that.
Really?
And 5 months later, I was in the operating room and they were performing a full hysterectomy.
Oh, wow.
So I don't have evidence nor facts that was a trigger. My gut tells me it was. It was absolutely horrendous. So just something to, it's food for thought. I'm not stating any facts here, but it's food for thought. So my experience was, well, first of all, you go into surgical menopause, which is not ideal. I can just tell you that I have no pain.
Wow.
And to me, look, it was very tough. The colon surgery was, I was really scared, really, really scared. The team that operated me was so good at what they were doing. So you have to have different specialists if you have a situation like mine. And they were just excellent professionals. And, you know, many people have asked me, is it worth it? Is it worth losing your female reproductive organs and having other consequences? You know, you suddenly go like, oh my God, hot flashes and night sweats and vaginal dryness and all these things that you're like, what happened to me? You know, what happened to my sexuality? What happened to all of that? And I want to be super open about it. It's tough, man. It is tough to deal with that. But you know what? I'm just grateful I have no pain. That is the quality of life that I was striving for. And it's a godsend.
Wow. Yeah, I think funny enough, I was going to ask you how you dealt with the, you know, medical menopause as a result of the hysterectomy, but I think I've heard some.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Very straightforward. I use a functional medicine doctor platform here in the US. I really love functional medicine. I'm more personally about that. And they have prescribed me bioidentical hormone treatment, which is something I am a very big fan of. Okay. And I think it would be important for your audience to understand there is a big difference between, let's say, the pill or a normal synthetic hormonal treatment and bioidentical hormone treatment, because the molecules of the bioidentical hormone treatment are much closer to our human molecules.
Right.
We actually did an interview. I encourage everyone to view. I interviewed a naturopathic doctor at Hormone University, and she explains those differences really, really well, so that people understand more about it, because it's very new. It's relatively new, and still not so much known about it, but highly recommended, at least from my personal experience.
Okay. I'll put the link in the show notes for the interview so people can have a look if they're interested.
Great.
All right. So thank you once again for sharing, your story and your journey. Like you said, it doesn't feel like a journey, it feels like a battle.
Yes.
But you've come out the other end, and I'm happy that you're not in pain. For most of us, our quality of life, just to feel human and feel normal, and go to work without bending over in pain, and stop looking. I think for almost a year I looked ridiculous at work before I finally got diagnosed. When it got to the worst time of my life, I was a mess. Like, everyone just people used to ask, "Is Tenny okay? Like, what's wrong?" But not everyone could come to me, but I was a complete mess. I think I was just lucky that my team, which was a small team, they understood, especially when I told them I had been diagnosed with this condition. It's rare. My manager actually Googled it. So I'm really sorry that you didn't have that experience and this is why we're raising awareness, and people need to know it's not a taboo. It's not your fault. It happens, and it could happen to anyone. So
Absolutely.
people need to understand a bit more about these things, and support people even when they don't understand how it affects the person. But yeah, it's been great just sharing your story and seeing a kindred spirit. So now let's talk about Hormone University. I feel like
Yeah.
I I have an idea of the answer to this, but I wanted to know what your motivation for starting this platform is.
Mhm.
What made you say, what, I'm going to do this, and just a bit more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like I said before, I was one of the lucky ones that got to sit down with a doctor, and he took the time to explain everything about endometriosis. But as I started looking into this and reading about the ramifications of what we all go through with endo, I was asking women that were coming to me, "Oh, hey, Anna, you're volunteering for the Endo Foundation, and I have this issue and I have that issue." And the common denominator was, "I don't know about this. I don't know about what does that mean if I have stage 4? What does that mean if I'm suddenly with all these hormones being in complete imbalance?" And etc. It's a long etc. So I realized there is not enough education. There is just not enough education. And doctors have an average of 15 minutes with a patient. So I got frustrated, and I always loved education. I think it's the foundation of everything. So that was my only motivation, was how do I do something so that people have less suffering, women have less suffering, and they can advocate, especially they can advocate for themselves. I want women to go to a doctor and say, "I know about X, Y, and Z. Now, what can you tell me about this?" Because otherwise, we just don't have the knowledge. So our motivation, because I have a wonderful team, is to educate women and men about hormonal conditions.
Amazing mission. So how does it work? Is it a website where people just go to and can read resources and articles? Is it something that has a membership, or is it just all free resources? Go on there and get what you need.
At the moment, it's completely free, and it's basically a platform where we have a range of topics, and you can see that on the menu, all the topics you can imagine. And behind those topics, we have articles that we are basically doing research on. We also have a really, really good advisory board, a medical advisory board from very different fields in medicine. I mentioned before naturopathic doctor. We also have a UK doctor that specializes in endometriosis and fertility, Dr. Colin Davis, Mr. Colin Davis. And we have this team of doctors that are there as well. And they're so valuable to us. So the objective for us is to impact 1 million individuals by 2023. And like I said, all free resources. We have a wellness planner there that is really useful, one-pager where you can track your wellness goals. We have recipes that you can download. So I really encourage people to go to the website because there is so much information and we're spending a lot of time researching. And also once a month, we've started a Q&A with people that send us questions over the course of time. So we collect those questions on Instagram. And this next week, first week of May, we're going to dedicate it to answering those questions.
Okay.
So yeah, but there is an important point here. Is many people ask us, what do I do about this? And we can't answer that. We are an educational platform, but we can't be your doctor as such, right? So it's important to highlight that.
Yeah, that's important. I think what you're doing is really, really important because I remember that when I started my journey, I was very wary about just getting information from various websites, which were like blogs and just, all sorts of information. And this is actually one of the reasons I started the podcast and wanted to talk to professionals and, people who know what they're talking about, because I know that it's easy. There's so much information, but a lot of it is rubbish. So that's why so what you said about, it's an educational platform, you're doing a lot of research to bring this information easily to people, but then they have to take the next step and then go to their doctors armed with information. That's one of the posts on my Instagram. I'm like, go to your doctors armed with information.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really great. I have a few pop quiz questions, if I'll call it that.
Nice.
Well, not really pop quiz. I just wanted to say, so you were saying earlier that people ask you about imbalance in hormones and stuff like that. So what would you say that means when you say unbalanced hormone? And what conditions would you say, result from having these unbalanced hormones? I'm asking this because someone might be listening now, doesn't have endometriosis, doesn't have fibroids, or doesn't know they do have it, and just wants to know, what does this mean exactly?
Absolutely. And I think we need to go back to what are hormones, right?
Yeah.
So before we talk about imbalances, let's look at what are hormones. And hormones are chemicals that are produced by our glands, right? But what many people don't know is that they kind of rule our bodies. They rule so many aspects of our lives. They're essential. They're really essential. So when things are out of whack, then that specific part that is potentially not great is, of course, being without equilibrium, right? So the important point is to understand what they do. They are controlled primarily by the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, the thyroid, and so all of that, all of those glands are doing and balancing perfectly as machines, perfect machines as we are, right? Yeah. So they deliver these messages and they control heart rate, they control our sleep, they control our reproduction, they control stress levels. So that is why it is super important to have balance with hormones. So, but it's a complex world, right? It's a very, very complex world.
Okay. And then, so when it's not balanced, what happens then? What does this mean? So I understand that, you control a lot of things, but what, in the layman's terms, what does that mean when it's not balanced?
I mean, you have many different signs. It just depends, right? So some people think, oh my God, I'm feeling like I'm in a bad mood, or I feel really sad. And immediately in these days, oh, let me go to a psychiatrist. Well, you know what? It might just be that you have a hormonal imbalance, because the mood is controlled by hormones, right? So acne, that's another one, right? Insomnia is another one. Stress, of course, that's another one. So cramps, libido, there are so many different aspects. So what we usually encourage is, when you're not feeling well, doesn't matter what aspect it is, it actually might be a hormonal imbalance. So what we recommend is get yourself tested. Test your hormones, because something might be completely out of whack, and that is what's causing that issue.
Okay. And what would you say so I know you said there are loads of things that could happen as a result of this imbalance, but what would you say are obvious or known female conditions that come up as a result of this imbalance?
Yeah, so the most two common ones are PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and endometriosis. So just those two make up for 20% of the adult female population. That's a lot. That's a lot, right? And that's, these are statistics that are a little bit old. And the more we talk to doctors and specialists, the more they tell us, we think it has increased. So those are the two most common ones that we see. And then, of course, you have thyroid issues as well. That's also a common one. And then, of course, the classic ones with PMS, PMDD. Those are obviously the one that affect 80% of the adult female population, right?
Well, thank you so much for sharing this and for starting this platform. I think it's, like I said before, very important for us to educate ourselves, because that way we can advocate for ourselves, we can fight for ourselves, and we can really go to our doctors, who eventually will probably be the ones that would help us, but then
right.
We go to them understanding a bit more. Like you said before, doctors have 15 minutes, 10 minutes to see you, and it's not their fault sometimes. There's so much, they're trying to do to see loads of people. So I think this would be really, really helpful to a lot of people, and I can't wait for more and more people. I can't wait for you to hit your target.
Oh, thank you. 1 million. It's an ambitious target, but we're going to try. One thing I would also say is, think about when you go to and you start a new job, right? You want to go there and you want to know what you're doing, and you want to have that knowledge. So, because of the world that we live in and doctors having such little time, go there as if it's your job to know and understand, so that he can basically manage you as your boss, let's say, right? So yeah, that's an analogy that I sometimes mention.
I love that, actually. I love that. I was going to say, is there anything finally in particular you want people to take away from the podcast today? But I feel like
there you go. There you go. Yeah. Keep on learning, and let us know if there is any specific topic that we can research for you. And come to hormone-university.com, or Instagram is at Hormone University. And and please help yourselves and share that knowledge with others as well. It's really important.
Oh, thank you so much, Anna. It's been really great having you on the show today, and I had a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, let us know on Instagram and Facebook. You can also join our community on Health Unlocked and ask any questions or share your stories. Don't forget to share, rate, and subscribe to this podcast. If you also have any questions to ask or topics you would like to be discussed, feel free to send an email to info@notdefinedbyendo.com. Till next time, remember, you are not defined by endo.